아무도 누가 세야 디 유튜브에 타방 람 봐 상유 이게 상유 좀 된 얘기다 아무도 또 나오고 순식간에 제일 지게 안에 가서 좀 첨부해서 그냥 유지한 이거처럼 유지 하면 이제 좀 아니나 야가 되니까 근데 세슈마스 대수가 인식이 유지 지금 유지도 나는 것이서 유지가 되나 저게 디나를 숨어와 내가 남 그래서네 아주 두마세야 이게 주야디 또 무슨 셈 장에 셈 안에 멤버들이 가면서 셈 야가들 성비를 찾아서 개비를 상을 파기 주지 렌디가 다시만 저기다 이게 이게 주야다 근데 이게 두마세 타면 숨으로 다시 또 셈을 바로 찾고 진짜 셈비가 유예되네 나도 이게 집어들라 되게 충분히 가서 담보만 소리하다 이게 상담을 줄 이게 우주는 상담도스 중앙까지야 상담아 이게 우주는 바세 안데야 또 정신이 되어서 시행 마선 되시 야채 차는데 이게 우주가 담이 되면서 반대니게 상담하기 우선모데 배서 걸어서 또 침을 차야 되더니 제주신비에 딱히 우주가 제주신비가 되면 나세 어두스지면 아주 이제 마시 아무도 제주신비 아니냐는 남기진 배냐는 나네 안다 제주신 자니지고 안 제주신 예 제주신 기회 세계라다 가르치는 지원은 파주루는 지야에서 집에냐는 주변에 주변에 상대는 셰르면서 아무도 파주루 주변 안에 셰르면은 지다리 근데 샤다지 말 지키신 쉬사지 아무도 파주루 주변에 담아 근데 셰르게 파주루는 지다 이거 있으면 아주 쉬하고 좋지 단 미니스들이 쉬사로 쉬어
Good evening. Buddha taught a vast number of sutras in the time that he abided in this world, and the meaning of those teachings were all to guide sentient beings so as to develop the inner qualities to eradicate suffering and attain happiness. And the meaning of those sutras, many centuries later, the great Tibetan master Lama Rim, he condensed them into his great stages on the path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim Text. Thereafter, later, he composed the middling limb and then a short limb, the Song of Spiritual Experience. And that's the Song of Spiritual Experience, or the short Lam Rim, is an ultra-abbreviated version of the Lam Rim Text, the great stages on the path to enlightenment. And our text here, the essence of refined gold, is a commentary on the Song of Spiritual Experience by Lama Rim. What is contained in the Lam Rim, of whichever length, as well as in all the expansive sutras, is the faultless method to eradicate all the faults on our mind and develop all good, virtuous mental qualities. And this is because the meaning of practicing Buddhism is to transform one's mind. And this is because the method for happiness is to eradicate all mental faults and develop all mental good qualities. One starts out by focusing on the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity so as to develop a strength of mind. And as one develops this sufficiently, one has the sufficient strength of mind to engage in the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And here, as one's vision expands and one's mind becomes more expansive and one's outlook more far-sighted, one becomes a suitable vessel to train in the practices of a being of greatest capacity. And those trainings focus on cultivating bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And when this is developed, one then is ready to engage in the actual 6 perfections, the practices of a bodhisattva. And of those 6 perfections, we've already concluded looking at the first 5, and a month ago we started to look at the 6th perfection, the perfection of wisdom. And there we've already looked at the 3 divisions.
Deneza, Jugi, Nakisi, Jugi, Duma Segi, Seku, Duma de Garachin, Canis, Yungore City, Another Duma was where the Duma setting up Haku words with Duma Nazala, to Duma Zia. Another Chitin Gale, Hoa, another Digi said, another Digi to say, another Digi, Swa, Digi, United, Swa Devadi, another United Devadi. Diang tinggi dewa mares, diang capai kita tinggi dewa dan mares, yes, matu yang mares. Jadi nampak teacher dia dua dewa, jadi dia yang kursi dua dewa, jadi dia guru dua dewa tinggi dewa capai mares. Jadi nampak sudah dia ni guru dua dah, dia ni ada dua yang ada kares ni, mah supung dia ni kares, jadi supung dia ni capai tujuh dua lagi, jadi dua capai tujuh dua lagi. Tapi jika orang tu nyoya dua diru, ada kisah dua nyoya, orang macam dua kabelia, dewa dengan skill tu sini jual dua dengan orang. Tapi cawan tu dua di kedina yo boleh, ni kuat na yo, ni bawa na yo kedina yo. Jika dua di kedina macam tu yo boleh cawan.
To eliminate suffering, to gain freedom from suffering, it's imperative that one clearly recognizes the process by which suffering arises. One also needs to recognize clearly what suffering entails, or what is meant by suffering. The different divisions to explain or present how suffering is experienced. The most common threefold division, the first type, is what we generally understand by suffering, and that is the suffering of physical and mental pain. And this is widely recognized in the world when we experience, when afflictions arise and we suffer due to these, or when we have physical discomfort. This is what is recognized in the world as being suffering. But the second two types, these are not recognized in the world or in society as being suffering. The second is the suffering of transient pleasure. So what is meant by transient pleasure is worldly happiness, ordinary worldly pleasure that one experiences. And why this is considered to be a suffering is that feeling tone of happiness is not lasting. And not only is it not lasting, it is deceptive. And it deceives us in feeling that is the happiness worthy of striving for, and hence people strive to experience this type of happiness, and their life passes in this way. So this is the second type of suffering, the experience of transient pleasure. The third type of suffering is the basis that we all have, our physical and mental aggregates, and this is the all-pervasive suffering. Because as long as we have our physical body, the physical aggregate, as well as our mental aggregates, we have the basis upon which suffering is experienced. And as long as we have these aggregates, we will experience suffering. We will not be freed from suffering. In fact, we actually experience suffering day and night, whether awake or asleep, because we have this basis of suffering, our physical and mental aggregates. And that is what is meant by the third type of suffering, all-pervasive suffering.
Anda orang juga dah jenis ni dungai kuih dungai siapa siapa tu cuma sengat dungai ibadah dah so kuih ibadah macam hau kau macam nanti orang semua cuci orang semua nak cuci nak ya dah di kuih yang jadi tinggi dewa di mana dah sebab di le jaga je tu biar yoris saya cuma semua cuci cuci kau dah.
First of the three types, as was said, is widely recognized in society as being suffering. The second two are not. But through receiving teachings and reflecting on those teachings, we can come to recognize that these are actually, the second and third type of suffering, are actually suffering, and recognize them as such, and recognize that being freed of them will mean one experiences lasting, stable happiness, a happiness that is never punctuated by even a moment of pain.
Ada ni ada pupuk di juga relatif di murid, ada di juga relatif di murid, sini nyomong pada di murid sih nyomong pada. Dan di nyomong bahasa, dan di nyomong pada lah ya, rangi Gyuname Yomoba Serada, Rana, and the Rani Pami Yomoba, Delete Gigurua, Vite, Delete Gigurua, and then I'll do Yomoba, the others laid it was lay, Siba said, Siba chair. And the Siba lay, Siba the Garlic wasn't, is near Shell Lamba, Seba, the Lamba, he was. Dini the Arki was an Namshi, Tinges, and Lays, and Laysa, he was. Did the girls I did that? Na Sevena doesn't marry, but yes, that's Gyatso doesn't marry, but just another thing. They watch a tarot, the Monkey, Mevachi, we didn't Devan and Deva Yungway, Deva Kuguena, that doesn't marry, but the Pang, yes, the Mevas, yes. That doesn't marry, but Pana can spangles, Lamna, just the Tomba into we share up the Gomba, and the Bout, just a Tomba into we share up. Said that, commenting as that, share the Tomba into share, that Tomba into the share of did Tomba into the share of Gomba, doesn't matter about it, doesn't matter upon it, Yomobaki, Yomobaki, Lesa, Lemasanda, Kovalaki, Restism, they were legal resident, Moyan, Gudipa, more church, more train that Moyan, Gudi, more church, that never said the kind of school resident, she's not Tomba in Java, Tomba into the share of yes, on those students, Casin, I share that you go, she's a
Our physical mental aggregates, these are the illustration of the third type of suffering, all-pervasive suffering. And as long as we have them, we will suffer. When one then comes to recognize this, one will naturally think to oneself, well, how is it that life after life after life, I have taken uncontrolled rebirth in samsara, always with these contaminated aggregates? We want to come to recognize clearly this process. And what leads us to take rebirth life after life is the karmic imprint, a karmic seed on our continuum, being ripened and propelled into a birth in a new life. And what is it then that ripens that karmic seed on our continuum? It is afflictions. The afflictions in particular of craving and grasping that at the point of death serve to ripen a particular karmic imprint, a karmic seed on our continuum that propels then our next life. A process over which we have no control over. Hence, we have no freedom, we have no free will in this moment. We have no control. Our afflictions, those of craving and grasping, naturally arise, or habitually arise, and they thereby ripen an imprint on our continuum, and once again, we take rebirth in the realms of samsara. And how is it that we have these afflictions, as well as the imprints on our continuum? Well, the imprints, or the karmic seeds rather, the karmic seeds on our continuum are created throughout our life by the influence of other afflicted mamas. And all these afflictions have as their basis one, and that is the affliction that is an ignorance, and a particular ignorance of self-grasping. An ignorance that grasps at the self as being self-existent, as existing by way of its own characteristics or its own nature. And from this I, we grasp at a phenomenon as mine, and all our other afflictions arise, and karma is created, which at the time of death, the afflictions of craving and grasping ripen and imprint, once again propelling a new samsaric rebirth. When one recognizes this process, this continual, perpetual process, naturally then one will think, how can I break this? Because now I've recognized that this ignorance of self-grasping that is the root cause of all suffering in samsara. One will, having recognized this, one will seek a solution. And the solution is to cultivate the wisdom that realizes reality, the wisdom that recognizes reality, and this is the wisdom realizing emptiness. Understanding this process then, one will strive to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness within oneself, and to the extent that one cultivates it, one will strive ever more to deepen our familiarity with the wisdom realizing emptiness, recognizing that this is our route to freedom. This is our path to freedom. So that, thus far, this is what we've looked at in the preceding classes. As I mentioned a couple of segments before, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the Lam Rim Text, or the Great Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, summarizing the sutra teachings of the Buddha. This was then abbreviated some years later into the middling stages of the path to enlightenment, or the middling length presentation on the graduated stages to enlightenment. And then this was, thereafter, this was greatly reduced into the short Lam Rim, or the Sum of Spiritual Experience, upon which our text is the commentary. So each section ends with a verse from the Sum of Spiritual Experience. So that's where we'll start tonight, on page 45. So I'll read out my own translation, because it matches the lines of the Tibetan, but the meaning is the same as what you have. Wisdom is the eye that sees profound emptiness. It is a path eradicating samsara from its very root. It is a treasury of higher qualities that is praised in all scriptures. It is renowned as the supreme lamp dispelling the darkness of ignorance. Knowing this, the wise who aspire for liberation generate this path through immense endeavor.
That sometimes in Yamlin here, and I was a meal must be yours, the me never see you by that. This would be never. Yes, I don't know how me never is. This would be tricky or rushing more kind, but the two go, I said. To another me mena when you finish a la in the Duma. Is that dinner she, Jamni Jeda, Jajo Semna, Chimba, Sujan, Yaman, the Sogi, the same thing you hear. Same thing, Yaman, the so shepherd, the Sogi, Carson. She wore rushing, don't do words and do over this. Not over that, me, of course, could tongue do over, one rest. So that sheriff said the Jabba said, maybe sugar rushing more, Star, she do rushing, Star was the topic, don't want to be sheriff did that. Midnight, of course, got some more sugar rushing, but when it do over that, and some more sheriff, some more tea, very mixing, some more don't want you to the part, tongue and dark and tongue and sheriff, she's a sheriff to tongue, don't wait to sheriff two words, is that someone don't want you very mixes. Jamni Janshu Semna, and then Jimba Children something, the Sugi, and then someone don't want you to go over. Matovaza, Tungo, some of Toma and David by the check of Machina, Toma in the Sheriff did that, some of Toma and David Mixes and Midnight is.
Looking at the first line, wisdom is the eye that sees profound emptiness. This then indirectly is referring, with wisdom being the wisdom realizing, referring to the specific wisdom of the wisdom realizing emptiness, refers to the preceding 5 perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, and concentration. That those are likened to the blind, with wisdom being likened to the sighted. And this is because whilst the preceding 5 perfections are essential for the Bodhisattva to train in and generate and realize within herself, wisdom is crucial, because wisdom opens the eyes of the bodhisattva to profound emptiness or to reality. It is wisdom, and here again, the wisdom realizing emptiness amongst the many wisdoms, specifically the wisdom realizing emptiness, which opens the bodhisattva's eyes to the truth or to reality. The other perfections, the preceding 5, they do not open the bodhisattva's eyes to profound emptiness. Only the wisdom realizing emptiness does. To understand the point well that's being made in the first line, wisdom is the eye that sees profound emptiness, can take an illustration of 2 separate individuals. One is sighted but lame, the other is blind, but other than being blind, has no physical impediment. So these 2 people, one is lame, and the other is blind, are clearly what we call disabled. They both have a severe impediment. However, should they team up? Should they work together with perhaps the one who's blind carrying the one who's lame? They will make an unstoppable team. So in the same way, we can think about the 6 perfections, where no matter how much one trains in the first 5, as well as no matter how strong one's bodhicitta is, Buddhahood cannot be achieved. Similarly, no matter how much one meditates on emptiness, no matter how profound one's realization of emptiness becomes, that alone cannot lead to Buddhahood. The first set of trainings, those cultivations of love and compassion leading to the generation of bodhicitta, and then the training in the 5 perfections, in particular of generosity, ethics, and patience, these are called the method practices. Then cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness, this is on the side of the wisdom practices. These two, method and wisdom, should the practitioner focus on either one primarily, Buddhahood cannot be achieved. No matter how developed one's bodhicitta, how patient and ethical and generous one is, Buddhahood cannot be achieved solely through those practices. And similarly, no matter how profound one's wisdom is, through that alone, Buddhahood cannot be achieved. These two sets, method, so bodhicitta and the first 5 perfections, as well as wisdom, particularly the perfection of wisdom, need to be practiced in union, the two together. With the two together, they make that unstoppable team. Only one, whilst one can move forward, it will be as if one is disabled. But the two together, Buddhahood is certain.
Sibi zawa se de ngos khisi she de ta khowal khoye gyutso zawa de na sirna ma zo na ram de bot be zu tinzi de res sina sibi zawa se siba se de khowa che di ke gyu zawa de na so na ra shi de zu be a de bot be tinzi de res sina na de bot be zu be tinzi de zawa ne me ba so ge di lam de ga le la de to ma to be she de res sibi zawa tu ni ji be lam se.
Moving to the second line, but I'll read the first two together. Wisdom is the eye that sees profound emptiness. It is a path eradicating samsara from its very root. It is a path eradicating samsara from its very root. The very root of samsara, as was mentioned tonight, we looked at in detail in preceding weeks, is the ignorance of self-grasping, the consciousness that grasps at the self as existing in the way that it appears, as existing truly or independently. That consciousness is grasping at the self as existing in a way that it does not. Hence it is a wrong consciousness and an ignorance. And this ignorance is the root cause of all our suffering. And what is the path to eradicate samsara from its very root? That is the cultivation of the wisdom realizing emptiness. The consciousness that is in accordance with reality, this wisdom that realizes reality or realizes the emptiness of true existence, this is the mental path that eradicates the root cause of samsara.
Sibe zawa juni jibi lam se da ma de sheba sibe zawa se di ma zo ko wa le ki ji yu zawa ta sing ra na da ma yu wa chimbi ki ta ka sing sheba na je ma se na ra ji tu ba ji chimba di di ne le se sheba di ne da na zo ya na se di ko ro mo su ya da ne ji de se ne ka le ha ro jo ro ben ti na zo na be ki Dumdama nane Jelama Watan Dorje Bana Senza Baso Umaba Sedi Shishi Gore Umabana Umaradi Bada Tinubas Niche Bur. Dichasan Lam Rim Text Kozu Karik Hevar Yoresne Koala Mijunki Way Samdam Chipare. Dene Kasure, Jimbe Yamnejo, Sudim Yamnejo, Sube Yamnejo, Sundi Yamnejo, Jibare. Sheram Yamne Jiva Jibare, Chisa, Bene Jibare, and Yandu, Azuki Yandu Namna, Yamaja, Ranja, Tarbato, Satubalaya, Jimba, Suba, Dana Matobe, Sheram Jiva, Resmore. Janjusim Yamne Jiba, Sanyokola, Janjusim Yamne Jibala, Niji Jam, Nijikom, Janju Samkom, then Jimba, Suba, Yamne Jiva, Jibare. That this is Chazan killing Jibare, Jiba, the Sudin in the Jibare. 다 가르쳐 봐서 따와들 남의 것도 배 시럽세대 명호 시베서 중리지에 남의 것도 배 따와들이야 아니 잡아쇼 그래 내리 잡아 따위도네 잡아마도 잡아 제내는 것도 주다 강아지 하면도 그리고 주비 더는 년에 제단이 집어서
to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness, one has to recognize clearly how the I or the self appears to one, as well as intellectually understand the process of how the self appearing in a particular way is then grasped at, and the sense of not just an I, but a mind resulting from this, and then all the afflictions that result from that, and leading to the accumulation of karma. One also needs to understand that process. So that is difficult to do, but it is crucial. And it's within here that one sees the primary difference between the different Buddhist philosophical presentation. The different, there are, in general, you can say, 4 different tenets in Buddhism, but these all have their own subdivisions. So there's the starting with the course's presentation to the subtlest, go from the Vaibhashika to the Sautrantika, the Chittamatra, and then the Madhyamaka. And the Madhyamaka is divided into 2, the Svatrantika and the Prasangika. So amongst these 4, plus their divisions, in most areas, their presentation is the same. They have a similar presentation in terms of how to cultivate definite emergence. They have the same presentation in terms of the trainings in the first 5 perfections of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous perseverance, and concentration. And for those who are striving to become Buddhas, they will have the same presentation for how to cultivate love and compassion, and then to develop those 2 into bodhicitta, and how to develop one's bodhicitta further. Where the difference comes between the different philosophical tenets is in the view, the presentation of the view, in particular, selflessness. This is where the difference comes in the presentation of tenets. Amongst the various religious traditions in the world, whether Buddhist or non-Buddhist, many techniques are presented so as to develop, so that the religious practitioners can develop themselves, become a kinder people, gentler and better people. But between religious traditions, the view is usually where the starkest difference is. So many religions will present the self as being permanent, often created by a creator God. Buddhists put a great emphasis on coming to recognize what is meant by the self and how the self exists. So in the context of Buddhists, The self that, for example, is not sitting and listening before we came here tonight was the self that was traveling and has perhaps already eaten supper. There is this self, I am sitting, I am eating, I am listening. So what is that self? Well, amongst the Buddhist, different Buddhist philosophical schools, and again there are many subdivisions, but that with the course's presentation, the Vajrashika, they mostly say the illustration of the self is the aggregates. The aggregates are the I or the self. They say that the self isn't something completely unrelated to the aggregates, separate from the aggregates. It is. The self is the illustration. The aggregates are the illustration of the self.
That semzaba ina ane karelam ne da pumbo ji ma le so da pumbo su yu pumbo se de na se de pa chim ju de su yu pumbo na ba le skar se ne su yu pumbo de nga le be na zu ma shi di ane nga su yu pumbo le ba cha ko le ine nga le ke wa chi ma do na san yo ko ba tu bo le nga le le ki se ti do as tu na do do as je san su yu pumbo de do me do a pe ni shi san su yu pumbo de ane me ba so sha ko ba me cha ko je san su yu pumbo de nga ba le su yu pumbo de nga yi ba ne me ba so de ni nga me ba cha so de ni nga san yo ko ba ko yo ma nga ke wa chi ma do yo ma je nga ba le je san su yu pumbo de nga ba le de ta ne na zu ge she ba na su pe ne da ji yu wa shi de nga le ba de ya ma ba le ska san na zu ni hu di ka wa shi sa ga sa le ine ma zu ge ane na yo ba je san wa shi de nga ba le这都真蛮新奇的，这一些把的经安来了呢，但这虽然俺买来了，我光就是可是一些把的经安这个国宝人家把小娃子，人家什么车上干些，人家现在就要的出来，人家人家现在什么车上买我干些过来，人家哪有的是，就是。国宝人家把小娃子，人家的国民学的，人家公民拿车上干过来是，可是什么车上什么老车上，什么车上干过，就是哪有的是？就是那一些吧，那种写吧的那写个短写过，就是往写的一些吧，那错话都是什么写的那种的，可是往写那就一些吧主播的，就是写吧的个哪把的，哪有嘛的？大概要古新那边写吧是有的时候，古新那边写吧是的给你那一点，你古新那边写，那的古新那边写吧的，在的广州都新旧些，古新那边写吧是结果生产的，但你看的是他们。当然是上街国王推下的第把上街国王推出，第马上就给我起码马上就来第马住，就是给我看起码就他们就做的那第的是关系那么些吧的，是的，sem那这个往些的一些买给你的，些吧就下来，
The Chittamatra school, when they look at what the self is, they say, well, very clearly, the form aggregates of the body cannot be the self, because when we die, we still progress to the next rebirth, but our corpse remains behind, so this body cannot be the I. Moreover, our consciousnesses, when they look at whether the various consciousnesses can be the I, they would divide it into two groups. There's 5 sense consciousnesses, and the Chittamatrans would say they cannot be the illustration of the I, because, for example, when one is asleep, these consciousnesses, the sense consciousnesses, are not manifest, but yet the I is still there. Similarly, with the mental consciousness, the 6th consciousness, when one is in meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, attaining a cessation, the mental consciousnesses are also not manifest, but there is still an I. So those 6 consciousnesses, the 5 sense and the 1 mental, these cannot be illustrations of the I. So therefore, they uniquely posit another consciousness, which is translated either as the mind base as the whole or the foundation consciousness. And this foundation consciousness is what they say is the illustration of the I. It is this that goes from life to life, and eventually it is what will progress to Buddhahood. So the foundation consciousness is the illustration of the I, according to the Chittamatran school.
And the Bana Kumarangi Badi Gradosan, and the Yiji number Sheba, one Sudia Namare, one Shetia Namare, 이시바나는 이시바 차가면 뭐요래서 이시바 라바데 예나 이시바 참모치요래서 이시바 참모디 나세디레서
Presentation of philosophical tenets starts with the Vibhashika that we looked at, and the third is the Chittamatran, but the second then is the Sautrantika, and the fourth is the Madhyamaka, which is divided into the Svatrantika Madhyamaka and the Prasangika Madhyamaka. So that's Svatrantika and Sautrantika. These two schools have the same illustration of for the eye, and they say it's the mental consciousness. But the mental consciousness has a great variety in terms of subtlety. The subtlest level of the mental consciousness, it is this that progresses from life to life. So this is asserted as the illustration of the eye by the two schools, the Sautrantika and the Svatrantika Madhyamaka.
결혼식 시에바나는 누구치는 제바제제 나도 누구치는 제바제다 수딩아레베 시에바나레도 제바제바는 나세 자원이 예 다른 제베잖아 간이야 봤어 동사지마도 나 다시 말도 이무도 도르마도 나이 그런 얘기 봤어 뭐야 다른 제베잖아 나이야 봤어 아니 나한테 가는 수요일에 가는 샤고르스네 마다 마치고 풍봉하고 이게 때문에 이게 남아셔봐 참모들이 봐 뢰봐 따봐서 이거 해서 뢰봐 따봐서 되는 나서 봐 뢰봐 따봐서 이거 봐 봐도 아니 당신 집에서는 뭐지 가르도 마디 가와도 두수 제바지는 마스 냐요 말스 마다 마제바지 봐 이 남아셔봐 봐 뢰봐 따봐서 이거 봐 해서 나도 왜 따서 지나지 캐기
The final school, the Prasangika Madhyamaka, they say, when we engage in the same analysis or the same objects of analysis, investigating the body, we can't find anything in the body that is the self. So that's the same as yourselves, other Buddhist view holders. But when we look at the various consciousnesses, no matter how you divide them up, so whether it's sense or mental, no consciousness can a self or an I be found. In fact, all we come to find is the self is empty of existing the way that it appears. It's empty of inherent existence. So when we seek a self, we don't find a self. Only emptiness is realized. The self being empty of inherent existence, empty of existing the way that it appears. But then what do the Prasangika posit as the illustration of the self? Because they don't say the self is completely non-existent, it's just empty of existing in the way that it appears. It doesn't exist in the way that it appears. So they say when one doesn't investigate, there is a self there then. And that self is merely imputed by mind onto the basis of aggregates. That's all. It's only an imputation, or merely an imputation, or just an imputation by mind. That's all that can be called the self.
가사 라디오도 지수주가 지비 지마 세시고디 다데 좀더 오마 차상기 코베 자와 디레시고다 코베 자와데 가사 라디오도 지수주가 지마 세 고 가사 라디오도 지수주가 지마 세시고레 디 코베 자와 레시고 제다마와 도데 바데 샘자마다 오마로 차상기 디수 코베 자와 레시고 디수 반다 자주를 두고 레시고레 제다다 나 라지 마 가사 라디오 튜브에서 주지 지바세 근데 튕기 비기티 가사 라화치레스 그래서 디 가사 라디오 튜브에서 말로 또 봤자기 동반이 두고 말했어 동반이 맞도 봐이나 코베 자와 바통 말했어 다 튕기 비기다 코베 자와 샤야디 나 데버트가 집에 딘지를 해서 샤바다 지상 튕기 바다 너만디 코베 자와 샤라니 됐어 다 차라게 마셔 미라 됐어 차서네 거기 가사 라디오 집에 있을 수 가사 다도 주가 집에 刚才点把这个点睛都可以找这个新主写的，你点睛都可以找来，是挺有别的，肯定也得做的。
As we've just heard, then there are different illustrations of the self in accordance with the different Buddhist philosophical views. They also, accordingly, have a different. They identify a different root cause of samsara. The non-Prasangika schools, they all present the root cause of cyclic existence as being the grasping at the self as being self-sufficient, substantially existent. And when one realizes the self to be empty of existing this way, empty of being self-sufficient, substantially existent, one severs the root cause of cyclic existence. So this is the view of all of the non-Prasangika schools. But Prasangika, they say, whilst the self does not exist in the way that you mentioned, it's not self-sufficient, substantially existent, realizing that is only realizing coarse selflessness. There is a subtle level of selflessness which needs to be realized. Merely or only realizing that the self is empty of being self-sufficient, substantially existent, will not lead to liberation because the root cause of samsara hasn't been severed. And the root cause of samsara is the ignorance of self-grasping. This is the root cause of cyclic existence. And one needs to realize the emptiness of this. Then, and only then, can liberation be attained.
코와레 데레 마방 바도 나서데 레다 요모발라 라마요마다 나서라 라마 토비요마레 나서 카레 집에 나서 두디 보여 봐자 나서 나서 나나 나게 메사바이네 지지체나 라마요 나이 그래 nentikot dan kige 차와칭 메서나 차와칭 그래 진짜 라마스 가요 말에 진짜 당 코이게 레다 요모바다 마방바이나 나 데레 기어도 나 니와 죽으면라요 말에就是语言经的唱的完呢，然后没办法记住的。当然这个雷雨的经没什么呢，雷雨的这个语言经的吃上唱完呢，雷雨的经的。那上这个没什么呢，然后说人们的语言经吃上唱，就让说人们的唱到了这个呢，上有我透露的。就是然后这里，然后呢语言往给前的对吧呢，语往给往的句对吧的嘛都，然后说然后要。유 야호 차바는 먼저 야가 중국에 유만 맞지만 안 누가 중국에 진짜 내내자 유샤원 소화래 진짜 유샤원에서 진짜 유샤원 소화래마도 안저를 라와서 셰모 셰기 원주와 유디기 원주와 유디 지고 주사는 거 유기게만 계세요 말 유디 튀긴 유사원나 유나 차사마 주사가는 유마상만 상주면 유기게만 제가 호라마 제부가 니나시 하나 저기 개회에 상보시 사원에 내 차산 야고차 차는 라운드 야고차 지구야 그래 유니온 받아 내 나가서 뷰티 사사는 라운드 바디 간증나 누가시고 내 상하줄래 나중에 남배체 나라 뒤지게 최탐제 샤원에 해서 그래 뒤지게 최탐제 샤원에 그래서 유단 기기 원도 주어를 마도 戒呢，而且是有点建议忘了给我的，这是向往的意思。就是就在向往，就是有些他就女向往性的行动，就是说有点建错了的，约出的，有点建错了的，约出的，就是让我有约出的，就是这个约出过，然后约出过的，就是在向往的嘛，都让我买的是的，就是俺这有么嘛办法都，俺这有么别让我投入买的，就是给你那这什么原来的差别在。然后就让我继续过来，继续拿起过来，现在然后这个有目标真的让我投入过来。
There I've now presented some differences between the philosophical schools. Another area where they agree is that the reason for ordinary beings like ourselves to take rebirth after rebirth in cyclic existence is due to contaminated karma and afflictions. So all Buddhist philosophical schools agree there. Us as members of society and everyone in our society, we all long for freedom. We often feel, perhaps always feel, most people perhaps feel that they have free will, that they largely are free. But this belief that of free will is actually mistaken when you think about the process of afflictions and karma. Actually, we have no free will. When causes come together, a result follows. For example, when causes come together and the elements of our body are no longer in harmony, our body changes in a particular way, we have no control over that. And then certain particular feelings will ripen, will suffer. We have no control over that. The causes come together, the result is experienced. In fact, when all the causes are accumulated, a result will follow. Whether that result is a particular next thought, or particular next rebirth, or liberation or enlightenment. When the particular causes are accumulated, the result will follow. So actually, we are not under our own control, but we are under the control of something other than ourselves, something that we don't consider ourselves, and that's contaminated karma and afflictions. So this shows that we actually don't have free will. But what we can do is, with consistency, focus on developing virtuous causes, particular wholesome causes, because as one gathers more of these specific virtuous causes, then as they gather wanted, desired results, these will be achieved. But still, those results come about independent on the causes. Without accumulating the causes, we can't make the result come about. We do not have that freedom. Causes have to be accumulated for the wanted result to be experienced.
아니네 수럽 군라 나비 연진 때르세. 아니 지디 수럽 군라 나비 연진 때르세 상이게 수럽 군세 수럽 뭐 나려야. 아니 상만나려야 동바이도 비 셔럽세니. 네, 배마서 연진 치고래 연진 차시 주의게 때르세. 때르마서. 때르서 가서 동바이도 비 셔럽도 고발할 때네 아니 지기 잠이시 아니 누가 찰터야. 타바다 탐지기 벽고 토토야 아니 지게 다 타바다 탐지기 벽고 토만 묘모 균 차상 동토야 아니 연년 차상 토토야 진짜 되게 중요한 차상 동거 이도 외셔 되는 거래서 진짜 니니 연단 탐지 중요하게 때 무슨 유연시 시로 시반으로 지된 동거 이도 외셔를 해 야고래서 니 동거 이도 외셔도 공부를 니 마음는 연대인데 용받치다 연대 동거 이도 외셔 공부를 했어 동방인도 배시를 나봐 지금 연년 단지 중요하게 때려져서 나봐 지금 난 거를 해지 손을 쳐서.
Returning to the verse, the third line, it is a treasury of higher qualities that is praised in all scriptures. Here then, the wisdom realizing emptiness is being likened to a treasury of higher qualities, and it is praised in all the scriptures. Why it's been singled out here in our context is to serve to encourage us to make great effort to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness, because it serves to enhance, it serves not to only develop this particular strain of good qualities, but it enhances all others too. The other perfections such as generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth, as well as love and compassion. It enhances all of them because this particular good quality of wisdom enables one to see in accordance with reality, and thereby enhances all good qualities and ensures that all of them together become causes that lead to enlightenment.
And in a demo was a dreamy cholo drop. Timu Munser Jume Chodo Jase, Timu Sedi, and Yu Nisu, Rashin, Kashicha, Maton Hamboati, Monty, Mont Timus. Then the Timu Sedi. And Timu de Timu Yu Kaya Hamoa de Timu Sedi. The Hamoa was a Rashin to a Ziba de Timu. As a Hamo running, Yu Rashin needs a Hamo, Rashin to the Zimba. And Hamo Tom the Timothy, and the Bumba Nahuna, she said, and Nahuna Devana, and they Kahimi, the Chatongo, and Nashi Nahuna. She said, Denegi didn't know the Mevaso, Timothy Bamba, Mevasuela, and Timubumba Mevasuela, Germain Hashin de Choto Yubadi, Yashin, Toma to be shared. Yes, it's a Toma to be shared, to come to Tony to be shared, Billy Kavana, Timothy Mevasako.
The fourth line, it is renowned as the supreme lamp dispelling the darkness of ignorance. The ignorance that is referred to here could also be translated as confusion. It specifically means a not knowing. And what is not known? Well, this confusion or this ignorance is specifically a consciousness that is not in accordance with reality. It doesn't understand how an object actually exists. It doesn't understand the actual way of abiding of whatever its object is. It doesn't understand the nature of the object. Hence it's an ignorance or a confusion of not knowing. And as long as one is in this darkness of such ignorance, one will not be acting in accordance with reality. One's meditations will not be in accordance with reality. And the lamp that dispels this darkness of ignorance is the wisdom realizing emptiness, because it is in accordance with reality. And to the extent that one cultivates wisdom, ignorance is eliminated or confusion is lessened.
That the Darshane, Tardu Kevai, Lam de Peba to me, Keva, say, the Darshane, that the share, the count share, Toma into be shared, and me nashing, Chigi, near tone, topic, me nashing chair. See with our quality, give us our new doesn't mariba, bomber, our never so can be there. And then sort of only and then you and that and Junior dear nashing. And then Timba. The never say I to Menasiba. And then the next point to be shared the nigger in your body, how much here, and Tardu Keva said, Kogi Keva said, that's a Yusemba, Rana, she has some time to hold a Tara, Tarje, a scientist of Gober, Dubu, Keva, Jayusemba, and me, and the nigger don't want to be shared, and the Bezu and Yemen.
The final two lines. Knowing this, the wise who aspire for liberation generate this path through immense endeavor. These two lines start out with, I'll read them again. Knowing this, the wise who aspire for liberation generate this path through immense endeavor. So it starts with knowing this. What is known refers to the previous four lines. That wisdom is the eye that sees the profound emptiness, and it is the path that eradicates cyclic existence from its very root. It's also then likened to a treasury, as well as the supreme lamp dispelling the darkness of confusion. Here then, the wise, or bodhisattvas, recognizing the great qualities of wisdom, they strive for the sake of all sentient beings, themselves and all others, strive for their benefit to place all beings in a state of enlightenment. They strive to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness.
And it is not the near the Tomba to be in the time, dear Naja said, Somanashi, and also Tomba to Baina, and then Jamni Yamachi and Janusem Yamachi and Jamni Jia, massively Divachimotion Mores. Kalion was a Kansungo resident, and also Tomba to Baina. How you do the Yuan Tongje, they never say you about, say to you about, the Nibu about the civil house or house. Just not in the house, that many doing that is 라고 되게 교회에 되게 내가 특히 다 되는 두데 되나 뭐 되게 그것도 강아 채샤 새벽에 땅 저기 하와로 이 숙취 문제야. 되는 이 기회 오기 되려야 탑람 돼야 하와로 배제시에 거. 장민이 숙취에 대해서 가서 동반이나 디고레스 디스코라 가서 교회 자산에 되는 요가 하고 되는 교회에 세기 요가 세에 탑람 요가 세이 두기 요가 탑람 요가 뉴바 요가 통도 안 매기 교회 아다도 걸 강아 디제 규딜레요 디메바스에 되는 돈 닝제서 되는 게 콜레 니지기야 니 숙취야 되는 니지 디원 내가 아동화세 되는 탑람다 네 것도 되게 있어요 샘주체 누두체 된지는 거 탑람 된지 네 거가 세투고 지세 산도디 숙취 내가 아주 디와 때는 아주 지다라 아주 규모지게 민지 내가 강아 쉬어되면 그 강아데 가려요 바지 유가를 되어 받아 가서 하고 와지 코로나하고 맨날 가서 하고 맨날 다 하고 와지 강아 세야 되는 거 하고 왜는 어디 거디 내내 지나 강아 쳐도 디디 곧 네디 시에서 강아 세투서에서 배심 시에서 로든제 강아 세야 무고 어디 나시다 잠이지 가서 동반이 또 와는 잠이지 깨야 돼 누가 심취해 모르지
A further essential quality of the wisdom realizing emptiness is that it enhances the strength of one's love, compassion, and bodhicitta that one has already developed. To the extent that one cultivates wisdom, one's love and compassion is strengthened. And how so? As one cultivates the wisdom, understanding reality, it becomes vividly clear to one not only what the cause of suffering is, but that it can be eliminated. In order to realize emptiness, one needs to understand theoretically the root cause of suffering, as well as how to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness to eliminate it. Going through this process of gathering knowledge and then integrating it into oneself so that one is actually cultivating the consciousness of wisdom, realizing emptiness. One is taking this theory and realizing it, transforming one's own mind by it. And thereby, this theory now one knows to be valid, not merely intellectually, but experientially. And this has a transformative impact on oneself because one realizes freedom is possible. And freedom is possible not for me and me alone, but for anyone who gains this realization. Anyone who engages in the same process that I am engaging in, anyone who does this, they too can attain freedom from pain, freedom from misery. Coming to recognize this, deep well of compassion and love for others arise, recognizing that all other beings who are blinded by the darkness of ignorance, they can develop this lamp of wisdom within them too and gain freedom. And this compassion then for suffering beings serves to ensure that the practitioner strives ever more to cultivate a deeper realization in themselves, and as well as to be of greater benefit to others right now. So this we can liken in our own experience to when we meet someone who is suffering in a particular way, and if we can relate to the suffering that they are experiencing, we see how readily compassion for them arises, as opposed to if we cannot relate to their suffering. Similarly, when the practitioner realizes emptiness, they realize for themselves freedom is possible for them and all beings. And recognizing the state that they were in before is no different from the state all others are in now, powerful compassion arises within them.
난 내게 동반이 또 와 있나? 난 전주심 냠는 지혜야. 안에 숙취에 있고 그래서 샘전 고유 유모 바셔는 제가 방에 동반이 또 와 있나? 유모 바셔는 방바 산지 고고 투기 여바도 두고라. 또 봐서 이게 람디 고발에 때 산지 고고 토요일 바셔 세기 여바도 세고 하고 와서 이내 산지 고고 토요일에 아다 되게 제 토비게 탑람 차상 여바도 하고 요도 안 되네. 아다면서 토가 터지지야 되네 또 인장에 토바 지긴 셈비게 전주심 산이 뭐가 토바 지긴 셈비 상모데 아니 셈슈디 체이고 진짜 아주 나가러 왔더니 아주 송으로 지기네 협상 체고 휴지라고 이거 통구요 통제 내가 저기 타블로 제네라고 세바하고는 얘네들 레알들 배주지기로 와 협상 라비오에 협상이야 마홍 딘디라기 타블로 뒤에 야고하고는 내가 셈슈디 통말아 그래서 타블로 맞춰서 세바하고 코로나 뒤에 디디 토부 디디 제고 디디 하고 무슨 제발은 그 남산 디제를 셈슈시리고 와 디나시리 다치서 산지고 원토비 동바지 또바는 묘모바 방비 방투고 바데 괜히 방투고 하고 그래 방비 방바에 바 통사래 진짜 디투고 바 타블로 차상 코로나기 냠용 디디디 용세 디디 세바하고 완전 다들 심지어 산지고 방마선 타면 셈비게 토바지기 셈비게 전주 심령인데 슈시리고 그러시네.
Fourth, an actual bodhisattva, as their realization of emptiness deepens, their determination to become a Buddha grows ever stronger. And this is because, as mentioned in the previous segment, the validity of the path becomes ever clearer to the bodhisattva. They recognize that not only can the seeds of non-virtuous karma, contaminated karma be eradicated, but so too can their imprints, and therefore the attainment of Buddhahood really is possible. They would have, of course, accepted this intellectually, but now it becomes manifestly clear to them that the result of this path is possible. And this will give great strength of mind, deep courage, and this will serve to ensure that all obstacles on the path, they readily move through them, and because of their great strength of mind. So perhaps in a way that we can more readily relate to this is we think of a business person whose business is being very successful. They will have great energy to continue with their business. They're not going to sit back and relax because they're seeing the success of what they're doing. They'll put ever greater effort in to maximize their success. Likewise with the bodhisattva who has realized reality.
안디 마상하는 중에 나 되게 니지 잠 니제다 집에 냐면 가래 집이네 나고 거라나 지게 동반이 상다 지게 동반이 상다 베네 심전에 미네 심전함지 근데 그 다시 집에 지나는 문이 주가 요 말씀에 동반이 상다 내 동반이 상다에 되네 이 돈에 아니 니지고 니지 개발에 되네 동반이 안 동반 상다에 안에 니지 개발에 이제 심 니지되게 니지되게 누가 준비해야 니지 사지 그거와 다뭐 니지 기획을 심지어는 미비게 동반이 상다 심지어 담지 나와나시 랑문이 주바 자원이 요 말에 생각이다 랑문이 마주바 상다 되게 랑문이 마주비 심지어는 제가 동안에 전화 생각이 니지 기획을 해서 아니지 예다 아니 말아주기 다데니기 고미야 아니 고미야 니지게 유 셈전내지게 대마마 주말에서 다데니기 셈전 중앙에 전화 세비 니지 코로 뭐야 대마마 주말에서 얘네 니지 공부하고 라니 가사 아니야 대마마 주말에서 다에는 코스는 대마마 미바상다 하시고 얘네게 상다에 대기신 주변에 진비냐면 추진 주변에 가는 내가 전시사 반응이 동의도 배 전시사한테 세상에는 냐면 뭘 가르치면 제가 나도 동의도 배 상다에다 얘네게 대진바다에 진비지에 나 진바다 유리기 쳐서 라신이 마주바에 나와 나셔는 뭐인데 좀 자고 영화를 쓰면 상다야 진비지에야 라신이 주고요 진바다 유리야 가지고 주고요 진바동이게 삼로디야 라신이 돼요 말에 다 진바동에 가사디야라는 문제 주고요 말에 쓰면 상다네 코스는 대발 마미가 상다 진바 나와서요 근데 사상 문도신의 개주 주고요 제가다 오늘 상주고 와토발라 진비냐 추진냐 파주냐 가르치는 도시네 전시사 말은 그 도시는 나고봐
For those who feel you have some understanding of the presentation of emptiness, then I'd encourage you to combine it with your other meditations. For example, when one's meditating on compassion, reflecting on the suffering of beings, generating compassion, wanting all beings to be freed of suffering. So here one's generated compassion for suffering by the sentient beings. Then meditate on emptiness. Meditate on the emptiness of the suffering itself that is befalling sentient beings. Meditate on the emptiness of the mind of compassion that is generated within oneself. Meditate on the emptiness of sentient beings, as well as oneself as the meditator. So here you combine your generation of compassion for sentient beings with your realization of emptiness. And this is called objectless compassion or boundless compassion. Here, one's taking one's generation of compassion and then meditating on the emptiness of the three spheres. So this is the same process as I mentioned last week, but in relation to generosity and other perfections, where one meditates on generosity and then reflects on the emptiness of the three spheres. The offering substance being empty. The practice of generosity, the mind wanting to give, that too is empty of true existence, as is oneself, the giver. So there, in the illustration of generosity, one meditates on the emptiness of the three spheres. And one should do so, this same process, with all of the perfections, as well as mentioned now, also with compassion. So you have the object, the practice itself, as well as the beings involved, all being empty of inherent existence.
And the Lama Rim Text, Rimba, and the Passion to Vinya, the Chasan, that is my Kibusugi, that Kibuchu Lam Rimba, and Jiggy Lam Rimba, Kibuchi, Chimber Lam Rimba, said that the Passion Tasa Chagore.
This then is how bodhisattvas train, with both of the realization of emptiness, conjoined with whatever topic they are also meditating on. So now we've looked at the trainings that bodhisattvas engage in, the trainings that a practitioner of supreme capacity engages in. Preceding this, we looked at the practices that are shared with practitioners of intermediate capacity. And we started out by looking at the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity.
고비 귀인 차상 뻥비 뻥 두고 봐 토비게 야 지금 통로도 어다디 도구도 세비다 디 도구도 세비게 진실성 기고 해지 나야 오부도보다 내게 가시 가지 선자마다 내게 다워 숙체 뭐 내게 좀다 선자마다 내게 이거는 아직 뭐 이지게는 자실성 기 살을 제라 운동이 또 봐요 해지
As we looked at in preceding classes, in particular a couple of weeks ago, the best technique to meditate on emptiness is through the presentation of dependent arising, where first one gains an intellectual understanding of dependent arising, then even if one's understanding is quite coarse, that is sufficient to start gaining familiarity with the meditation, where the first step was to see how to gain familiarity with how the self appears, or come to recognize how our sense of self appears to us, and then investigate our body and mind, seeking such a self, seeing if it exists in this way, and doing so through the presentation of dependent arising. So I'm not going to go through that meditation now, because we've looked at that in detail many times. But it is a meditation of great importance. And I encourage you to do this meditation and conjoin it with the other topics of your meditation. Because even though one's knowledge you may feel is limited, but nevertheless, repeating the meditation over a sustained period leads to familiarity being generated within us. And that will be sufficient to have an impact on our way of thinking, our way of interacting with others and with our life around us. One other point to make here is that those who generate actual love and compassion and bodhicitta, so those who enter into the path of bodhisattvas, probably the vast majority of them have already attained a realization of emptiness by the time they realize bodhicitta. In other words, a realization of emptiness probably usually precedes the realization of bodhicitta. And the reason for that is that bodhicitta is the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others, to achieve Buddhahood so that one can lead all others to Buddhahood. But in order to give rise to that in a sincere way, in a transformative manner, one has to know that Buddhahood is possible. And to know that Buddhahood is possible, one has to know that the afflictions, together with their seeds and imprints, can be abandoned. And it's a realization of emptiness that gives one the confidence that Buddhahood is possible. So love and compassion may well be generated, but when one realizes emptiness, then that love and compassion is much easier to develop that into the strength of mind that becomes bodhicitta. So it's probably the case for the majority of bodhisattvas, but it's not necessarily the case, especially those who perhaps struggle with the Prasangika view, who accept perhaps not struggle with the Prasangika view, but who accept another philosophical view, say the Svatantika or the Chittamatras. They may well develop bodhicitta first, and only afterwards the correct view of emptiness. So thank you. We'll conclude here tonight, and then next week we'll start with the next section, the 4 ways of positively influencing others. So thank you very much.